He was a powerful CEO until one accident changed everything. Now, paralyzed, he thought his life was over. But when he discovered a single nurse asleep in the break room, his heart did the impossible. It started beating again. This is not just a love story. This is a story of second chances. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that love can find us in the most unexpected places. The fall of a titan. The rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Carter's penthouse, the storm mirroring the tempest inside him. 6 months ago, he had been invincible. The youngest CEO in Verve Tech's history, a man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance. Now, he sat motionless in his wheelchair, staring at the San Francisco skyline as if it belonged to another lifetime. The accident had stolen everything. One slick turn on Pacific Coast Highway. One split-second loss of control. The doctors called it a miracle he survived it all. But survival wasn't living. Not when his legs refused to obey him. Not when the company he had built from the ground up was now being run by interim executives who whispered behind his back. Ethan, Mark, his longtime assistant, stood in the doorway, holding a leather-bound planner. The car's here. It's time. Ethan didn't turn. Cancel it. Mark exhaled through his nose, the way he always did when bracing for an argument. You can't keep putting this off. Crestwood has the best spinal specialists on the West Coast, if there's even a chance. There isn't. Ethan's voice was ice. He'd read the reports. The words permanent paralysis glared back at him no matter how many times he tried to unsee them. Mark stepped forward, gripping the handles of the wheelchair before Ethan could protest. You don't get to give up. Not yet. Crestwood Rehabilitation Center was nothing like Ethan expected. Instead of sterile white walls and the sharp scent of antiseptic, the facility felt almost warm. Soft lighting, muted earth tones, the faint sound of piano music drifting from a common room. It made him bristle. Hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. A nurse guided them through intake, her tone cheerful in a way that grated on his nerves. He tuned her out until she mentioned his assigned therapist. Olivia will be with you shortly. Make yourself comfortable. Ethan scoffed. Comfortable. Right. Mark shot him a warning look before excusing himself to handle a call from the office. Left alone in the private therapy room, Ethan clenched his fists. This was a waste of time. He reached for his phone, scrolling through emails he no longer had the authority to answer, when a noise from the adjacent break room caught his attention. A soft sigh, the rustle of fabric. Curiosity won out. He wheeled closer, pushing the half-open door wider. And there she was. Olivia Bennett, his Olivia, though he didn't know it yet, was curled in an armchair, fast asleep. Her auburn hair had slipped free of its ponytail, spilling over the crisp white of her scrubs. A thick medical textbook lay open on her lap, her fingers still loosely curled around the pages. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something other than anger. She was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't just that. It was the exhaustion etched into her face, the determination that lingered even in sleep. A single mom, he'd later learn, a woman working doubles to put herself through med school. But in that moment, all he knew was that she was real in a way nothing had felt since the accident. He shouldn't have stared, shouldn't have lingered, but before he could retreat, her eyes fluttered open for a heartbeat. They simply looked at each other. Then her gaze sharpened, not with recognition of his name or his fortune, but with something deeper, something like understanding. "You're early," she murmured, voice still thick with sleep. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And you're late." A faint smile touched her lips as she straightened, snapping the textbook shut. "Fair." She stood, smoothing her scrubs before offering him her hand. "Olivia Bennett, I'll be overseeing your therapy." He hesitated before taking it. Her grip was warm, steady. Ethan Carter. Her smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. A shadow, a secret, and just like that, the moment shifted, because Olivia Bennett knew exactly who he was. And it wasn't for the reasons he thought. Secrets in the chart. The therapy room was too bright. Ethan squinted against the fluorescent lights as Olivia guided him toward the parallel bars. Her touch was professional, firm, impersonal, but he could still feel the warmth of her fingers through the thin fabric of his shirt. "First, we'll assess your range of motion," she said. "All business now." The sleepiness from the break room was gone, replaced by a focused efficiency. Ethan gritted his teeth as she adjusted his posture, her hands moving with practiced precision. He hated this, hated being handled, hated the way his body refused to respond the way it once had. "You're tense," Olivia observed. "No shit." She didn't flinch, just arched an eyebrow and continued her work. Tension inhibits progress. "Breathe." He wanted to snap at her, wanted to tell her she had no idea what it was like to be trapped in a body that had betrayed him, but something in her steady gaze stopped him. So he breathed, and for the first time in months, he moved. Not much, just a slight shift of weight, a testing of balance. But it was something. Olivia nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Good. The word shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Mark returned as the session ended, his phone still glued to his ear. "Ethan, we need to—" "Not now." Ethan waved him off, his attention fixed on Olivia as she made notes in his chart. There was something about the way she held herself, a quiet strength that intrigued him. "You're stronger than you think," she said without looking up. Ethan snorted. "Tell that to my legs." Finally, she met his gaze. "I just did." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Olivia's pager beeped, breaking the spell. "I have to go," she said, already moving toward the door. "Same time tomorrow?" Ethan found himself nodding before he could stop himself. Mark waited until Olivia was out of earshot before whistling low. "Well, that's new." "Shut up, Mark." That night, Ethan dreamed of running. He woke gasping, his sheets tangled around his useless legs. The digital clock on his bedside table read 3:17 a.m. Sleep was hopeless now. He wheeled himself to the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Olivia Bennett was probably awake too, studying, working, caring for whatever life she had outside these walls. Who was she, really? The question nagged at him. There had been something in her eyes when they'd met, something more than professional interest, determined to distract himself. Ethan reached for his laptop. A few keystrokes brought up Crestwood's staff directory. Olivia Bennett, RN, top of her class. Specialized in spinal rehabilitation. Nothing unusual there. Then he saw it, buried in an old news article from a university website. A photo of Olivia accepting an award. Standing next to her was a young man, early 20s, dark hair, familiar smile. Too familiar. Ethan's blood ran cold. Daniel Bennett, a junior developer at Verve Tech, one of the 63 employees laid off during the restructuring last year, one of the 3 who'd taken their own lives afterward. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. Olivia hadn't just recognized him. She'd known exactly who he was. And now she was his therapist. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Crestwood early. He found Olivia in the break room again, this time fully awake and reviewing patient files. She looked up when he entered, her expression unreadable. "You're early," she said. Ethan didn't smile. "We need to talk." Something in his tone must have warned her. Olivia set down her pen slowly, carefully. "About—" Daniel Bennett. The name hung between them like a guillotine. Olivia didn't move, didn't breathe. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought she might deny it. Then her mask cracked. Just a little. Just enough. "Yes," she said simply. Ethan's grip tightened on his wheelchair. "Why didn't you say something?" Olivia met his gaze head-on. Would it have changed anything? The question hit like a punch, because she was right. It wouldn't have changed his injury, wouldn't have brought her brother back, but it changed everything else. Ethan exhaled sharply. "I didn't know. About Daniel? About any of it." The words tasted like ash. The harassment, the cover-up. By the time I found out, it was too late. Olivia's voice was quiet, but the pain in it was razor-sharp. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then Olivia stood, gathering her files. "We should reschedule today's session." Ethan reached for her without thinking, his fingers brushing her wrist. Olivia. She froze at the contact, her pulse racing beneath his fingertips. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the heart monitor on the wall let out a shrill alarm. Ethan's blood pressure was spiking. Olivia reacted instantly, her professional instincts overriding everything else. "Ethan, look at me. Are you in pain?" But the pain wasn't physical. It was a realization, the terrible, gut-wrenching realization that the woman helping him learn to live again might hate him more than he hated himself. And he couldn't blame her. The weight of truth. The cardiac monitor's shrill beeping filled the room, a relentless soundtrack to Ethan's unraveling. Olivia's hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting sensors, checking vitals, her touch clinical yet steady. But her eyes betrayed her. In the flicker of hospital fluorescence, Ethan saw it. The war between her duty as a nurse and her grief as a sister. "Breathe," she instructed, her voice stripped of its earlier warmth. Ethan obeyed, dragging air into lungs that suddenly felt too small. The numbers on the monitor gradually stabilized, but the tension between them remained thick and suffocating. "You should rest," Olivia said, already stepping back, already retreating. "Wait." The word tore from him, raw and unpolished. She paused at the door, her shoulders rigid beneath her scrubs. "I didn't know about Daniel," Ethan repeated, the admission scraping his throat. "Not until after." Olivia turned slowly. The break room's soft light caught the gold in her hazel eyes, turning them molten. "But you knew about the others." A statement, not a question. Ethan's fingers curled around the wheelchair's armrests. The leather creaked under his grip. The restructuring was necessary. Verve Tech was bleeding money. "I never authorized." "The harassment?" Olivia's voice dropped to a whisper, but each word landed like a hammer blow. "The 70-hour work weeks? The performance reviews that came right after employees filed complaints." She took a step forward, and for the first time, Ethan saw the fury she'd been smothering. "You built that culture, Ethan. Your name was on every policy, every email, every termination notice." The truth was a blade between his ribs. Because she was right. He had known. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the shape of it. The late-night calls from frantic managers. The HR reports he delegated without reading. The whispers about VP Reynolds' hardline tactics that he dismissed as necessary for innovation. Guilt was a familiar weight by now, but this was different. This had a face, a name, a sister who smelled like lavender and exhaustion. "I'm sorry." The words were pitifully inadequate. Olivia exhaled sharply, her breath shuddering. "Sorry doesn't bring him back." A nurse's voice echoed down the hall, calling for assistance. Olivia straightened, her mask slipping back into place with terrifying speed. "We'll resume sessions tomorrow, if you still want to." Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone with the ghost of her brother and the crushing weight of his own failures. Mark found him hours later, still in the therapy room, staring at the parallel bars. "Jesus, Ethan." Mark's tie was loose, his usually impeccable hair mussed. "You missed 6 calls." "I thought." Daniel Bennett. Ethan didn't turn around. "Pull his file. Everything we have." Mark went very still. "Why?" "Because I need to know." A beat of silence. Then Mark sighed, sinking into a chair. "It's bad, Ethan." "Tell me." And Mark did. The mandatory overtime. The public humiliations in team meetings. The corrective action plans that bordered on psychological torture. All orchestrated by Reynolds. All ignored by senior leadership. And the suicide. Ethan's voice was barely audible. Mark hesitated. Daniel was on a PIP. Reynolds had him working 90-hour weeks to prove his commitment. The night Mark swallowed hard. He'd just been denied paternity leave. His wife had a high-risk pregnancy. Ethan closed his eyes, saw Olivia's hands, steady, capable, healing, and imagined them holding a newborn who'd never know his father. Get Reynolds on the phone. "Ethan." "Now, Mark." Olivia didn't come the next day. Instead, a burly male therapist named Greg arrived, his demeanor all cheerful professionalism. Olivia's reassigned, he explained, adjusting Ethan's leg braces with none of her careful precision. But don't worry, I'm certified in... Where is she? Greg blinked. I'm not at liberty to... Ethan grabbed the man's wrist, surprising them both with his strength. Tell her I'm fixing this. That afternoon, Ethan Carter did two impossible things. First, he stood, not fully, not gracefully, but for 3 agonizing seconds, his legs held him upright without support, his muscles screaming in protest. Second, he called an emergency board meeting. Via video link from his penthouse, his wheelchair strategically out of frame, Ethan issued 3 commands. Terminate VP Reynolds immediately. Launch a full investigation into Verve Tech's workplace practices. Establish the Daniel Bennett Memorial Fund with an initial endowment of $10 million. The board erupted in protest. Ethan let them talk. Then he leaned forward, his grip white-knuckled on the desk. The next person who argues will join Reynolds in unemployment. Silence. Good. He ended the call. The doorbell rang at midnight. Ethan knew who it was before his assistant announced her. Knew it in the way his pulse leapt, in the way his breath caught. Olivia stood in the hallway. Her scrubs replaced by jeans and a worn sweater, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. You fired Reynolds. Ethan nodded. You're starting a fund. Another nod. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the medical equipment, the half-empty whiskey glass, the framed photo of his nephew. Then, finally at him. Why? The word hung between them, fragile as a promise. Ethan met her eyes. Because it's the right thing to do. Olivia exhaled sharply. A single tear escaped, tracing a silver path down her cheek. Ethan reached for her without thinking, his thumb brushing it away. She didn't pull back. And for the first time since the accident, Ethan Carter felt something other than pain. The unseen bridge. The tear on Olivia's cheek glistened under Penthouse's low lighting, a single crack in the armor she'd worn so well. Ethan's thumb lingered against her skin a heartbeat too long, the warmth of her seeping into his fingertips like sunlight through prison bars. She didn't move away. Neither did he. Then Olivia's breath hitched, and the moment shattered. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as if the June chill had suddenly seeped through the walls. You should sit down, she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Your blood pressure is fine. Ethan wheeled backward to give her space, the absence of her warmth leaving him strangely hollow. You shouldn't be here. A ghost of a smile touched Olivia's lips. Says the man who threatened poor Greg this morning. I didn't threaten him. You grabbed his wrist and growled. Ethan shrugged. I asked politely. The fragile humor faded as quickly as it had come. Olivia drifted toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection superimposed over the city lights. They offered me a transfer today, to the pediatric wing. Ice flooded Ethan's veins. Are you taking it? Olivia turned, her silhouette haloed by the skyline. Do you want me to? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they weren't saying. Ethan studied her, the way her fingers worried the hem of her sweater, the shadows beneath her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. The woman who'd haunted his thoughts since their first session wasn't just beautiful. She was a force of nature, a storm he wanted to drown in. No, he admitted hoarsely. Something unreadable flickered in Olivia's expression. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, stopping just beyond his reach. Then tell me why. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. There were 100 answers he could give, that her hand steadied him when the world spun, that her voice anchored him when the pain became unbearable, that in the wreckage of his life, she'd become the only thing that made sense. But what came out was, because I need you. Olivia went very still. And not just for this. He gestured bitterly to his legs. I need you to. His voice broke. To look at me like I'm not a monster. Olivia's breath left her in a rush. She sank to her knees before him, bringing them eye to eye. Up close, he could see the gold flecks in her irises, the faint scar above her eyebrow, the way her lips parted slightly when she was deciding something important. You're not a monster, she whispered. You're just a man who forgot he was human. Ethan reached for her then, his hand cradling the back of her neck, his forehead resting against hers. Their breaths mingled, warm and unsteady. Olivia's fingers found his. "I'm still angry." "I know. I may always be." "I know that too." She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. "Then what are we doing?" Ethan smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Building a bridge." And when Olivia kissed him, it tasted like forgiveness. The next morning, Ethan stood. Not the shaky, agonizing attempt from before. This time, with Olivia's hands guiding his hips and her voice steady in his ear, he held himself upright for a full 10 seconds before his legs buckled. They crashed onto the therapy mat together. Olivia's laughter bright against his chest. "You did it." Ethan grinned up at the ceiling, his body thrumming with exertion and something dangerously close to hope. "We did it." Olivia propped herself on one elbow, her hair falling around them like a curtain. In this stolen moment, there were no ghosts between them, no guilt, just the two of them, breathing the same air. Then her pager beeped. Reality came rushing back. Olivia sat up, smoothing her scrubs. "I have to go." Ethan caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I'll be here." The look she gave him then, soft and wondering and terrified all at once, would stay with him long after she'd gone. Mark arrived at noon with paperwork and bad news. "Reynolds is fighting the termination," he said, tossing a legal folder onto Ethan's desk. "He's claiming wrongful dismissal and threatening to go public with—" Mark hesitated. "Well, everything." Ethan flipped open a file. The first page was a cease and desist letter from Reynolds' lawyer. The second, a list of names. Dozens of them. Former employees with grievances, each one a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. At the very bottom, circled in red, Daniel Bennett. Ethan's stomach turned. He's using Daniel as leverage. Mark nodded grimly. He knows about Olivia. Of course he did. Reynolds had always been viciously thorough. Ethan closed the file with deliberate calm. Set up a press conference. Mark blinked. "What?" "We're not hiding anymore." Ethan wheeled toward the balcony, where sunlight streamed through the glass. "If Reynolds wants a war, I'll give him one on my terms." Olivia found him there hours later, silhouetted against the sunset. She said nothing as she approached, just rested her hands on his shoulders, her touch steadying the tremor he hadn't realized was there. "You heard." Ethan guessed. She leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. "I also heard you stood unassisted for 30 seconds today." Ethan huffed a laugh. 20 at best. "Still counts." Olivia rounded the chair to face him, her expression turning serious. "Ethan, about the press conference. I have to do this." He caught her hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit in his. Not just for Daniel. For all of them. Olivia searched his face. Whatever she saw there made her exhale slowly. "Okay, just that." No arguments. No pleas for caution. Just okay. It was more than he deserved. Ethan tugged her closer until she was straddling his lap, her arms looped around his neck. "Stay tonight." Olivia arched a brow. "As your nurse or girlfriend?" "Both." He kissed the corner of her mouth. "Neither." Another kiss, this time to the pulse point beneath her jaw. "Just stay." Olivia's breath hitched. Then she was kissing him properly, her fingers tangled in his hair, her body warm and pliant against his. When she pulled away, her lips were swollen, her eyes dark. "One condition," she murmured. "Anything." Olivia pressed her forehead to his. "You stand at that press conference. Even if it's just for 5 seconds. You stand." Ethan's throat tightened. He knew what she was asking, not for the cameras, not for revenge, but for him, for the man he'd been before the accident and the man he could become after. So he told her the truth. "I will." And for the first time, he believed it, standing tall. The morning of the press conference dawned gray and heavy with unspoken promises. Ethan woke to find Olivia already dressed, her fingers nervously adjusting the knot of his tie, before he'd even gotten out of bed. "You're fussing," he murmured, catching her hand. Olivia exhaled sharply. "I'm not fussing. I'm fussing." Ethan tugged her down for a kiss, savoring the way her tension melted against his lips. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "It's going to be fine." She pulled back, her hazel eyes searching his. "You're really going to do it? Stand in front of all those people?" Ethan glanced at the parallel bars Mark had installed in the penthouse's living room. For weeks, he'd practiced in secret. Every stolen moment between therapy sessions and board meetings, every midnight when the pain kept him awake. He'd fallen more times than he could count, his body aching, his pride bruised. But today he would stand. For Daniel. For Olivia. For himself. "Yes," he said simply. Verve Tech's headquarters buzzed with uneasy energy. Reporters crowded the atrium, their cameras trained on the empty podium. In the wings, Mark adjusted his earpiece, his voice low. "Reynolds is here. Front row, smug as ever." Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd known Reynolds would come. The man couldn't resist a spectacle. But seeing him now, perfectly cold and smirking, sent a fresh wave of anger through him. Olivia's hand found his, her fingers threading through his own. "Look at me." He did. "Breathe," she reminded him. Ethan obeyed, the familiar rhythm grounding him. Then the event coordinator signaled. It was time. The roar of the crowd faded to white noise as Ethan wheeled onto stage. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks, momentarily blinding. He positioned himself beside the podium, gripping its edges for balance. Then, with agonizing slowness, he stood. Gasps rippled through the audience. His legs trembled violently, sweat beading along his hairline. But he held on. 5 seconds, 10, until the room erupted in applause. Only then did he allow himself to sink back into the wheelchair, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Olivia's proud smile from the wings was worth every ounce of pain. The speech itself was short. Ethan confessed Verve Tech's failures, the toxic culture he'd allowed to fester, the lives damaged in the name of profit. He announced sweeping reforms, the Daniel Bennett Fund, and a personal vow to do better. Then he turned to Reynolds. "You were wrong about one thing," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You thought power came from fear. But real power," he glanced at Olivia, her eyes shining, "that comes from the people who lift others up." Reynolds stormed out before the Q&A began. The aftermath was a blur. Handshakes, interviews, Olivia's steady presence at his side. By evening, Ethan was exhausted, his body pushed to its limits. But when they returned to the penthouse, he found one last surprise waiting. A single envelope on the kitchen counter. Olivia tensed as he opened it. Inside was a photo. Daniel, younger and smiling, his arm around a visibly pregnant woman. On the back, in looping script, "Thank you for remembering him." Ethan's throat tightened. "His wife?" Olivia nodded. "She reached out after the press conference. She wanted you to know Daniel would have been proud today." The weight of those words settled over him, heavier than any accolade. Ethan pulled Olivia close, his face buried in her hair. They stood there for a long time, two broken people clinging to each other in the quiet, learning how to heal. 1 year later, at the inaugural Daniel Bennett Scholarship Gala, Ethan Carter did 3 remarkable things. First, he danced, not in his wheelchair, but on his own 2 feet, his gait uneven but steady as he led Olivia across the floor. The room erupted in cheers, but all he saw was her, the woman who'd loved him at his worst and fought for his best. Second, he cried, right there in front of everyone, when Olivia pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, "We're going to need a bigger apartment." And third, as midnight approached and the party wound down, Ethan stood alone on the balcony, staring at the city that had once defined him. Olivia joined him, her head resting against his shoulder. "What are you thinking?" Ethan smiled, his arms slipping around her waist. "That falling was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it had brought him here. To her, to this, to a life rebuilt, one imperfect step at a time. Love and redemption are possible, even when the road is hard. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of second chances.